Hey class, how you doing today? Hope things are going well. Sorry about not being with you today in class, but life goes on, and we need to be here. We need to be here in Kentucky to be with our family during this time. I'm looking forward to being back with you in class on Wednesday. I wanted to go ahead and give you at least a little bit of a preview of the me conjugation, which is lessons 28, 29, and 30. I really think if you'll read that, and I'm going to point a few things out to you, and then you'll be able to process it and understand without much trouble at all. But remember, I'll be back on Wednesday, and we'll go over this again, where I can point in a little more detail to these changes. I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage. I did not bring my Greek book with me. I wasn't planning on needing it, and then we had a change of course and had to redirect our return trip from the west side of Arkansas to central Kentucky, and then we'll be back with you guys in northeast Arkansas. And but I have my class notes with me, and I'll be able to kind of work and work through those on that. Also, don't have my vocabulary list with me either, but the vocabulary is pretty straightforward, as I remember correctly. We'll teach that on Wednesday and won't be responsible for that until the following week. But make sure you know your vocabulary well through lesson 27, because we certainly will have a vocab quiz on Wednesday on through lessons 1 through 27, really 2 through 27. So let's take a look at that me conjugation now, and look at these lessons. So this is lessons 28 through 30. The vocabulary for those three lessons is on page 169, 177, and 184. And you'll notice a few verbs in each of those lists that end in me. And those are the words that we're really focusing on. And so let's talk a little bit about the me conjugation. Now, what we've learned to this point is basically the omega conjugation. Those are all the words like luo or erkomai that end in omega or oh my. That whole system of endings is the omega conjugation. But a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away from here, there were actually two rival conjugation fraternities. So far, we've just learned about the omega fraternity. But now we're going to turn our attention to an older conjugation of verbs, that older conjugation of the me verbs. Just like nouns have three declensions and variations within those declensions, so too does the verb system have two conjugations. Now, please don't freak out about this, because they only vary really in the present tense, and then the rest of them operate pretty much like they would as if they were omega verbs. We really just have those alternate endings in just a few little spots. But by the time of the New Testament, this new fraternity, the Omegas, that's the younger one, the one that we know, had all but taken over the verb system, and there's only a remnant of the old me fraternity in the in common usage in Koine biblical Greek usage. The me verbs differ from the omega verbs in the present and imperfect tenses. Remember, the imperfect is built on the present tense stem, so that makes sense. And sometimes they differ a little bit in the aorist tense, but normally you don't sweat those at all. It's no big deal. There are a handful of distinctions or characteristics of the me fraternity. The number one, what I just mentioned, they use different endings in the present active indicative. You'll see those in your chapter. They reduplicate with an iota in the present and imperfect tenses. So if you look at these, you're going to see they all start out like delta iota or tau iota, or maybe iota with a rough breathing mark, and then a sigma. They all have that reduplication. They reduplicate kind of like the perfix, but they use an iota to reduplicate rather than an epsilon. But that only happens in the present and imperfect tenses. In the perfect tenses, they reduplicate with an epsilon just like they would if they were omegas. They also, in number 3, the me verbs will alter their stem vowel. Most of these words are short words, or they're short words with a compound preposition on the front of them. But most of them are short words with a single vowel kind of in their stem. And those vowels will lengthen. Omicrons will become omegas, alphas, epsilons, really just alphas will lengthen to etas, and back again. They'll go both directions. Let me see here. We'll talk about that some more here in a minute. But they'll lengthen their vowels from long to short. They'll look like they start out long, but then later in the other tenses, future, and perfect, and the aorist, they'll be kind of short. It's a variable vowel, and so just don't be surprised by a long or a short vowel in that main stem. Then also you're going to find that with the me verbs, it's very common for them to have both a first aorist form and a second aorist form. The first aorist is going to have a kappa alpha instead of a sigma alpha. Now you can tell these apart from the perfects, because I know the perfects use kappa alpha sometimes. You can tell them apart from the perfects because the perfects will reduplicate with an epsilon, whereas the aorist will just have an augment, a normal augment, just an epsilon or a temporal augment, should that be the case. So the kappa aorist, the first aorist, kappa aorist of the me conjugation, no big deal, no real worries. The main thing to remember about this most ancient of fraternities is to be aware that they are out there and have the resources to deal with them. Now, what I mean by that is, if you will look in your appendices in the back of your book at where it has all of the verb conjugations that we've been using, somewhere probably, if you get to like page 2, well, we know IME is on page 223 or 224, I think. It'll be somewhere around that, maybe a little bit before, a little bit after that. After the conjugations for the omega conjugations are all given, then they'll have the me conjugations. Now, kind of continuing my metaphor of fraternities, there's really not a lot of them. You just have to be aware there are 3 ringleaders: didymy, tithemy, and histemi. And most of the other verbs besides those 3 are compounds of one of those 3. In fact, if you look at your book, you'll notice that lesson 28 introduces you to didymy and then the compound verbs that are made with didymy. Lesson 29 introduces you to tithemy and then all of the compound verbs that are built off of tithemy. And then lesson 30, histemi, and the compound verbs that are built off of histemi. So if you just pay attention to the 3 ringleaders of the me fraternity, didymy, tithemy, histemi, then you're in good shape. And you can look a little bit more at didymy in lesson 28 on pages 170 through 172. Now, not having my book in front of me, I'm not even going to try to resuscitate all of those paradigms. It would just be flat embarrassing for me. But you can look at them in your book, and maybe you can pause the video now and take a quick look at that on pages 170 through 172. I'll let you do that and go forward with that. Now, after you've looked at didymy a little bit, turn over to page 177 through 179, and you're going to find tithemy. And you can take a little bit of a look at that. And then finally, on pages 184 through 186, we see histemi. All right? Histemi, you see all those forms. I'll give you a little bit to take a little bit of a look at that. Now, and you might need to back up to page 170. I want to talk about the stems of these three verbs. Let's look at didomi first and talk about that for a second. Now, if you look at didomi, remember the delta iota on the beginning is a reduplication that's used only in the present and imperfect tenses. All right? So take that off, and we're left with delta omega. The me is the ending. The delta omega is the present tense stem. Now, notice I said present tense stem because the real stem, the root, if you will, of didomi is actually delta omicron. And you'll see that pop up when you get into some of those other tenses in those conjugations on page 170 through 172. Now pop over to 177 and take a look at tithemi. As crazy as this sounds, the stem of tithemi is just a theta. The ta iota, remember theta reduplicates with a ta, or that ta delta theta, kappa, gamma, yeah, all that, all right? So the T on the front is just reduplication. The stem is just there, and the eta is just a long vowel to connect you to the me. Take a look at that, and you'll see that just that theta is the stem or the root for tithemi. Now, don't freak out. Tithemi doesn't occur a whole ton of times in the New Testament. You won't bump into it very often, so don't sweat it. You'll see didomi a lot. That's probably the most common of them. Tithemi may be second, but I think istemi is probably second. Now, istemi, let's talk about that a little bit. Now, notice the rough breathing mark on the iota. I know this font here of Greek, that doesn't, and I may have even, I think I even typed that wrong, for Pete's sakes. That's actually an acute accent. That should be, forget that. Let's move that over and do this. That's histemi. And I think the accent would fall there. It just didn't pick up the rough breathing mark and the accent, or I mistyped it, one of the two. But here's your form here, histemi. Now, originally, I'm going to go down here for just a second. Originally, here's our lexical form, histemi. Originally, this probably reduplicated with the sigma, but systemi, this doesn't sound good to the Greek ear. So this sigma drops out, and this actually catches a rough this actually catches a rough breathing mark to show this dropping out of this sigma. The why people with the question why scratching in their brains like me are going to be very dissatisfied in that we don't know why it does this. We just know that it does, and the most likely explanation is euphony to the native ear. And we can talk some more about that if you have some more questions about that later. But I just wanted you to see that histemi, it has that's the reduplication. But now to the stem or root for histemi is actually sta. All right? So we have sta for histemi, theta for tithemi, and delta omicron for didomi. Now, this eta here is doing that verb lengthening, that vowel lengthening. See here? Number 3, me alters the stem vowel from long to short. All right, see, looky here. Here we've got, in the present tense, it's long, a, but you're going to see in some of these other tenses, it goes back to the alpha and does that. So, didomi, do, tithemi, and histemi, sta. So those three roots probably are best learned or maybe even memorized with the lexical forms here. Now, where you have like compounds, apodidymy, apotithemi, honestemi, those words, they're going to use the same stems or roots. They're just going to have the compound prepositions on the front of them. And be careful with those because those often alter their meanings dramatically from what you would think they would be. Don't think you can just add the meaning of the preposition to the meaning of the verb and come away with it. You can on some of them, obviously, but on many of them you can't. And so it's best just to kind of treat them as a separate word and go from there and not try to guess those. Now, another little element that we want to talk about, and this goes back to this big battle between the different goes back to the big battle between the different me conjugation and the omega congregation. Is you can see there's a period of transition through from the me verbs. The sunlight has changed, and I'm getting an odd reflection now, but that's okay. Makes me look. Whoa! See if I can get that. Do that now. Oh, there it is. Dun dun dun. It's like from Monty Python when the voice of God. Bah, 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 bah. Sorry. So what happens there is, I forgot what I was talking about now, and I can't back it up without stopping it and doing that. So we're just going to go on from there. The transition. There's a transition from everything pretty much being me verbs to everything pretty much being omega verbs. But you get a few words that kind of get stuck along the way. In the New Testament times, we still have a few words, just a couple, that have me forms and omega forms. And so we need to, and that's what he's pointing out to you here on pages 179 through 180. And there may be a couple of others along the way, but we see that you're going to find apolumi, and that's a typo. I'm still learning this Greek font. That should be an upsilon. You have apolumi, and you have apoluo. Now, what does apolumi mean? It means I destroy. What does apoluo mean? It means I destroy. There is no distinction between the two verbs. So don't think that the writer's meaning one thing when he uses one, the other when he uses another way. That's just the way he learned to say it when he was crawling around on the kitchen floor and his mama was cooking, making some delicious pita bread. They both go that way. Same thing with diknumi and diknuo. You will see those used, sometimes even interchangeably in a passage rather close together. They don't mean anything differently. They're just the normal ways of doing that. Some use me verbs, some use omega verbs. Now I hesitate to use this illustration, but if we use an illustration using some bad grammar that I hear quite frequently in northeastern Arkansas, the difference between diknuo and diknumi is just like I hear a lot of people say I seen when they should have said I saw. They just learned it that way. I've gone so far as to try to beat it out of people, and they don't make the change because it's just ingrained in them. It's still wrong, but it's just the way. It's just a regionalism kind of related to dialect, and that's the difference between diknumi and diknuo. Some people say this, some people say that, but the meaning is identical. One last little thing that we have here in this chapter is we're introduced to the number 1. Now, the number 1 is different from all of the other numbers that we will learn. And we'll learn a handful of other numbers. The number 1, since it is singular, can modify masculine, feminine, or neuter things that are also singular. And since, I don't know if you've ever thought about this before or not, but numbers are adjectives. They describe the quantity or quality of of a noun. So they are adjectives. So when they describe singular things like one man or one woman or one chair, then you've got to match the gender. So the number one actually has three genders. And so heis, that first word, that's the masculine, that's nominative, singular masculine. Yes, they decline. The number one does. Heis is masculine. Mia is feminine. And hen, notice the rough breathing mark there. And it also has a circumflex accent, but I couldn't get that to work on that epsilon. I got it to work on the iota over there, but I couldn't get it to work on this font. I'm kind of, like I said, out of pocket, not used to using the font that I had to do. But anyway, hen, circumflex, rough breathing mark. That's the neuter form of the number one. And then when you get to two, well, if you've got two of something, then gender is kind of a mute thing because it could be one male, one female, one neuter thing, one masculine thing. So they don't normally have separate genders. They just stick with a single form. And so we'll learn some more numerals, but you can see there on page 180. And you can also see, we've already learned some words like eudaimos, or eudice, which means no one. Eudaimia, that's the feminine form, no one. And eudan, all the same word, that's hen. But now looky here. I know that heis looks a little bit like I'm sorry, I should say haste. It looks a little bit like ace, the word into, but notice haste, the preposition into, has a smooth breathing mark and never has an accent. Haste, the number one, has a rough breathing mark and always has an accent. Same thing with hen. Hen looks a little bit like en, the preposition that means in, but hen, the number one, always has a rough breathing mark and an accent. So that should help you tell the difference between the number one and the prepositions into and in, plus context. If it's modifying, you'll pick up on it real easy. And like I said, we'll learn some more numerals. Now this is how numbers are spoken. This is not like you wouldn't write haste for the numeral one. This is how you would spell out the name of the word, and we'll go on from there. Well, I think that's pretty much. That's pretty much all I got for you on this. I would like for you to, if you haven't done so already, you need to reread those lessons on 28, 29, and 30. And when we get back in class on Wednesday, then we'll kind of review it again, maybe do a little bit of looking at the lessons that are there. We'll learn the vocabulary for the three lessons. But like I said, at this stage of the game, you should be able to teach yourself some vocabulary without much trouble at all, and knock that out. All right, man. I hope you guys have a great day, and I will see you Wednesday. Peace be with you.